All right. Thank you. So this talk is generally for project managers, product leads, and non-developer contributors who want to play a meaningful role in open source projects, broadly speaking, and in leading WordPress releases more specifically. So what does it take to lead a WordPress release or any other major open source initiative without writing a single line of code? I can't see with those glasses up close. So in this talk, I'll walk through how I've helped shape and ship multiple WordPress releases by leaning on product thinking, project management skills, and what we'll call glue work today. You'll hear the story of a contributor who moved from helper to release deputy to AI team lead, all without commit access. Along the way, we'll explore often invisible roles that keep the WordPress project moving along, coordinating feedback, managing timelines, nudging consensus across Slack and GitHub, and motivating contributors across time zones. I'll share some practical tools, patterns, and some gotchas leading distributed contributor teams with a focus on how you can lead even if you're not an engineer. Whether you're a project manager, designer, or just someone who makes things happen, this session will help you recognize what leadership skills look like outside of the code, understand the real impact of glue work in open source, find your place in the WordPress project and level up your contributions, and leave with clear ways to get involved in releases, roadmap work, or contributor organizing. So also, hi, as he mentioned, I'm Jeff Paul, VP of Open Source at Fueled and 10up. I've been contributing to WordPress releases going back to 4.7 in August to December of 2016, sometimes as a release deputy then, sometimes as a release coordinator, and sometimes just as a facilitator or helper behind the scenes. But here's the catch. I've never had commit access, yet I've helped shape and ship multiple major versions of WordPress. You don't need commit access to have an impact. This talk is about how that's possible, and more importantly, how you can do that too. You don't need to be a core committer to have real impact. What you need are product thinking, non-engineering skills like project management or designing, documentation, generally some things that I call glue work. And by the end of this session, I want you to see some clear ways that you could lead in open source, even if you've never written a single line of code. So that's a very small chart. But historically, WordPress has been developer-driven, right? That makes sense. After all, it's software. But that imbalance means we often lack project or product managers who can help step inside the roles of coordinator, communicator, and facilitator. I've highlighted the two release coordinators here in this picture from WordPress 6.8. It's tiny, and we're in pink. So that's me. That's Michelle Frechette, who spoke earlier today. The one pink circle's me, the other Michelle Frechette. There might be some others in there that are PMs, product people, designers, but conceptually speaking, that's mostly engineers that are committing to the code base, right? So you can kind of see visually the disparity between those that are non-engineers and those that are. I would like to try and get more of people like me in the project. There are things that we can do without, again, needing to have commit access or being an engineer. Hopefully we'll get into a bit more of that today. And so, yeah, I pointed out Michelle and myself. We were both the release coordinator for the release. Again, I'm sure there are more there, but it's clearly dominated by engineers on that chart. And this is not a unique situation. Project and product managers, designers, and writers often contribute in ways that don't show up in the Git history, but are successful to a release. The WordPress release handbook even says that the main focus of the release team is to lead the release from beginning through launch, to act as connectors and facilitators. It doesn't say anything in there about writing code, reviewing code, testing code, or committing, right? Connecting and facilitating. Those are things you don't need to be an engineer to do. In practice, though, most of that work does end up falling on engineers who are already busy coding, reviewing patches, testing patches, and that means that the net result, the output of engineering effort is lessened because they are focusing on connecting, facilitating, and leading when they otherwise could be focused on coding or reviewing and testing. That result can also be bottlenecks in decision-making, some inconsistent communication, and stress when those release cycles get crunched. That's the gap I want to try and fill with y'all here and maybe any that are watching this video later on. So like I said, my own path started small back in WordPress 4.7. I was a release deputy. There were 2 deputies for that release because Helen Hosandi, who was the release lead, wanted some diversity in the perspective of people leading the release, 2 engineers and myself, 1 PM, and a bit of redundancy in the availability because all 3 of us had some previously planned time off during the release cycle. Up until 4.7, it was generally 1 singular release lead. These days we have release squads with a bit more people involved, but back in 4.7 is where it shifted to have a bit more diversity and people on the teams. During that time, I really didn't know how the release cycle worked. I didn't really know how the sausage was made as it was in WordPress core. And so I listened, learned, while filling in gaps that Helen and Aaron Jorban, who was the other deputy at the time, either didn't have time to do, or really in some cases they didn't want to do because they were engineers and didn't want to do some of the things that myself as a PM at the time felt more capable and interested in doing. That release had 466 contributors, 237 of them were brand new. So imagine onboarding 237 first-timers without any project managers, right? That lack of kind of native process thinking, which to a PM might either be innate or at least learned. Those 237 people need some people that can help guide them into the project. So that's when I realized that facilitation is just as important as code, not just in shipping releases, but in helping ensure that the project continues to scale, onboarding more and new contributors. From there, I continued filling in the gaps and taking on tasks that related more to PMs than to engineers, and I stepped up on additional releases, 4.8 as a lead, 4.9 as a deputy, 5.8 as a contributor, 6.1 as a tech lead, and most recently helping lead 6.8 with Michelle Frechette, like I showed on the earlier slide. Again, all those without commit access, without writing a line of code. So the pattern to me was clear that glue work, those PM sort of skills, really help scales the project and create space for contributors to succeed. So, what do I mean by glue work? It's the invisible leadership, I think, that holds a release together. It looks like things like triage, right? Reviewing issues and pull requests to make sure they are relevant and actionable. It looks like aligning scope so that betas and RCs are manageable, release candidates, RCs. It looks like keeping decision logs. So that's recapping discussions and arguments from long-running topics, usually as a comment in an issue in GitHub or a ticket in Track, so that those topics don't have to be redebated or relitigated week after week, month after month. That one is really particularly well-tuned for folks working asynchronously, right? You can review those things on your own time, help recap that and leave that decision log comment in Track or GitHub. It can also be things like consensus building, so nudging conversations along in Slack and GitHub that otherwise may have stalled out. And it's also making sure to celebrate things, right? Thanking contributors in public, which is also what helps keep some volunteers motivated. And this is really not a WordPress thing. It's not unique to our software project. The Apache project calls it the Project Management Committee that helps steward their community health. Kubernetes formalizes it with release leads and shadows of those leads. And whatever different teams call it at Apache, Kubernetes, and WordPress, glue work is really, I recognize as a leadership skill that healthy open source projects put in place. So a bit more practically speaking, what are some of these things that I'm talking about? So GitHub projects and issues that have clear labels are really indispensable, right? Those are things that a PM can step in and help identify, help track things across a project board. Things that engineers might not feel are helpful, but when you're trying to track the status of things, know what's maybe becoming urgent as a beta, RC, or final release timeline is coming up. Labels like things like needs decision or punt candidate help inform weekly release lead meetings. Make blogs, so make.wordpress.org/something, right? /core/AI/design, etc. All those blogs and Slack help keep communication public and searchable, right? Trying to make sure that all the discussions are transparent, ideally not in DMs or non-private channels. And if you find yourself in a conversation that's not in a public channel, or otherwise easily searchable by others, then it helps to document those discussion points, any decisions that were made, and publishing that back to a related track ticket, a related GitHub issue, or to a make post can be immensely helpful to again, make sure that that's public and searchable. Things that maybe an engineer might gloss over, but really for folks that are trying to manage a project, manage a release, need to make sure that that information is documented and shared. Decision logs help reduce having to repeat those discussions like I was talking about. Discussions or arguments, sometimes as comment flame wars happen. But summarizing those can ensure that, again, we don't have to repeat those over and over, and that there's a log of the current status of an issue. Scope gates are really like a go, no-go checkpoint, right? Define if a feature is ready for beta, release, beta or release candidate. So this past week, this coming Tuesday, WordPress 6.9 has the beta 1 release. The Gutenberg plugin has to basically ship a release ahead of that so that there's a version of Gutenberg that lands in WordPress 6.9 beta. That was supposed to happen this Tuesday, is going to happen tomorrow. And so block commenting, now known as notes, that's coming in WordPress 6.9. Last week and this week, we were basically having daily go, no-go checkpoints, right? Like, what is a blocker on this block commenting, also now known as notes feature, and being able to run those, identify what is truly critical, and driving engineers, designers, testers, whoever on those things ahead of that, scope gate or go, no-go checkpoint is helpful, right? Things that PMs might be doing in projects for clients anyway. Checklists for dev notes and docs can help ensure that nothing slips there, that we're getting developer notes out for major features in a release, documenting new things, whether that's user documentation, again, or developer documentation. And the release lead duties even call that out explicitly in the core handbook, right? Posting agendas, running weekly chats, and publishing dev notes. Those are all things that PMs, I think, are equipped to help contribute with, and it doesn't need to be handled by engineers. If you see those or other sorts of opportunities, then take those, right? Find the small ways to help contribute, start small, and help move the WordPress project forward, or any other open source ones you may be familiar with. But also, burnout is real, like something that Nadia Egbal put well. Maintainers simply don't have the energy to onboard every person who shows passing interest. That's why a shared load and some mentorship of new people matters. Non-code work, unfortunately, can be invisible, so don't be disheartened if your efforts aren't immediately recognized or credited. Do know that others who are contributing see that and see that you're helping. In time, just like an engineer contributing to multiple track tickets, you'll be noticed, you'll be credited, and continue on your path towards an experienced open source contributor. Since we're a global project, time zones delay feedback. A lack of synchronous overlap can also make conversations and getting to a decision difficult. Thus, a continued concerted effort when contributing will be necessary. Acknowledging that things will likely go slow will help ensure that you're not setting the bar too high in expectations for others responding or contributing. But leaning into that and planning to work asynchronously, when it works best for you, may be the best way to adapt to those difficulties of contributing across time zones. One of my favorite takeaways from Carl Fogel's Producing Open Source Software, and while not a direct quote verbatim, is still a general sense that's come up in a WordPress book club that I've been in with Aaron Jorbin that he hosted recently. But if it's not written down, it didn't happen, right? That's why documentation and clarity are lifelines for distributed teams. So how do you move from a contributor to a leader? Step one, start small, right? We're not, it's that old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? Write meeting notes to help summarize conversations. Run a triage session or a bug scrub. Help capture discussion topics or post agendas. Those are visible, those are valuable, and they're low risk ways to gain experience and build trust. Step two, own a lane. So maybe you coordinate documentation efforts or manage a dev note spreadsheet of what needs to be published during a major release cycle, or shepherd release notes for Gutenberg or another canonical plugin like the Performance Lab plugin. The docs team even has explicit descriptions for release responsibilities that provide good entry points for newer non-engineering contributors. Step 3, and it's not exactly that simple, but logistically speaking, from that point on, you've shown that you can facilitate, you can help coordinate an entire release. Kubernetes, like I mentioned earlier, has a formal lead and shadow model that helps train the next generation of contributors and works nicely as a repeatable pattern and process. WordPress has done this occasionally in the past with having cohorts in release squads or having actual people shadow release leads, but we could probably use a bit more structure in doing that on a more regular basis. But that all happens and that all starts by somebody stepping up, and there's no reason that couldn't be somebody in this room or watching online. So here's the condensed playbook. A little bit more words from me than on the screen, but 7 habits you can take away and start using immediately. And notice how practical these are. Agendas, decision logs, labels, crediting people, none of those, again, require code. I sound like a broken record, but I want to drive the point home that it's really not imperative to be an engineer. PMs, designers, tech writers, all of us can contribute. And all of those things help scale to release-related processes. So you can reach out to the core team to help write an agenda post for when there's a core dev chat that happens every week. You can leverage the prior weeks as an example. You can lean on the core team reps who can help point you where to capture agenda items and review the post before publishing. A very simple thing to do, something that you can do on a repeated level. It helps the core team reps, it helps those that are leading the release, and it's a good entry point to at least the core team. You could find an interesting enhancement or bug ticket with a lot of comments on it, review those, synthesize it, and publish a comment that summarizes that at the end of the current state. That helps people that are trying to work on a patch or a PR for a ticket or a GitHub issue, that they don't have to go through and do that, right? You taking the time alleviates it for them or others that are coming onto that ticket or issue later. Reviewing issues in a release milestone, whether that's Gutenberg or WordPress core, to make sure that keywords like has patch or needs patch, meaning an engineer has contributed something or we still need something to be contributed. Something like needs testing, right, that the patch has been submitted, but we don't have proof that it solves the problem or achieves the goal of the issue. To make sure that those things are accurate to the current state of the ticket. You can review issues that have the close keyword on it, which generally means things that for one reason or another isn't something that the project's going to take action on. Maybe it's actually invalid, it's not an issue, not a bug, or it's a feature that just does not belong in the project. You can review those tickets to validate that it does seem best to close it out and leave a comment in approval, or perhaps otherwise leaving a comment as an alternative. There are people in the triage team that when they see people commenting on a closed ticket that they concur that it could be closed, generally ends up getting those closed and helping to whittle down the number of tickets in track or issues in GitHub. Will be very thanked by those that are working in those queues. And while you may need to reach out to folks via Slack DMs or outside of public channels, Track and GitHub, again, try to ensure that you work towards contributing in the open. Where necessary, at least work, again, to document those discussions, document the problems, and any decisions in a public location afterwards. And again, ensure that folks contributing to efforts you work on receive credit for their work. You'd want this highlighted for yourself, so do the same for others. If somebody opened a ticket with a lot of good information, if somebody helped test it, if somebody helped validate that a PR worked or didn't work, right? All those should be folks that in the end get credit for that. And as you work across the project, leave good notes as you go, right? Continually update documentation to ensure that others that come behind you have a slightly easier path than you did. So my challenge to those here today, or again watching online, is to pick one of these habits. Try it next week. Maybe not on WordPress core, not with the Gutenberg team, but try it within your team, right? If WordPress core, if Gutenberg isn't part of your day job, there are other places we can try these things out. That's how you can start to kind of build that muscle memory and confidence that you can do these then within WordPress core or Gutenberg. And so to wrap things up again here, leadership in open source is not just about committing code. It's also about that glue work that I've been talking about that makes those commits possible. And releases depend on people who can coordinate, communicate, and can unblock others working on the project. And if you're a project manager, if you're a product thinker, if you're a designer, or just someone who likes to make things happen, there's a role for you within WordPress. So my ask today, pick a lane and show up. Post an agenda, join a triage call, join a bug scrub, take meeting notes. Those are all relatively straightforward tasks that are good places to help you grow into leadership and help show that you can help ship WordPress without shipping code. So, rather brief talk, got that in pretty quickly. Thanks for listening. And here's to getting more non-developers active within the project. Please feel free to reach out to me after this, here today or virtually later on. You can reach me via email at Fueled, jeff.paul@fueled.com, as well as on WordPress Slack at Jeff Paul, and on Blue Sky or on my website as jeffpaul.com. Thank you, and we'll open up for questions now. Thanks. She's got a microphone, she'll just hang tight.
She's wanted to do this all day.
So Jeff, you talked about triaging, and you work in a bit of a larger team with more people. Think about in a typical project for, in my company, we'll have a designer, a developer, and a project manager. So could you give me some ideas of how I might consider triaging better in my company to make sure that we can manage and solve or do things in a more effective way?
Sure. I mean, I don't know what project management tool you use or whether you're developing sites or apps or building a WordPress plugin, but conceptually there's probably some backlog of work that may be well defined, may not be well defined. I think generally the approach that has worked well for me is a Kanban nature. So the things that you know to be nearer term, make sure those things are well enough defined so that a designer or an engineer could pick up and work on it, right? Make sure it's actionable, well defined. If it's a bug, if it's an enhancement, if it needs design or if it needs engineering, those sorts of labeling, if it's in your project management tool, again, whatever that may be, those sorts of things can help ensure that things that are defined in whatever your backlog happens to be, again, in the project that would be Track or GitHub, that somebody that is an engineer or that is a designer that wants to jump in and pick something up, that they can easily find those because it's labeled as an enhancement or it's labeled as needs design, and that the actual issue itself is well enough defined and actionable for them. I don't know if that's what you were getting at or if there's a follow-up on that.
That's helpful.
Okay.
From a more technical perspective, what are the tools, especially for the WordPress project, you would say that project managers should kind of sink into a little bit and understand a little better in being able to contribute effectively to WordPress?
Sure. I think if you're going to work on meeting summaries, it's being comfortable in Slack if you don't use that as a tool, because that is where most of the teams have their weekly or bi-weekly chats, right? It's an actual Slack-based chat. So being comfortable there, being able to, scroll back to the beginning of the meeting and then concisely summarize what's been said. There are now AI tools that help with that much more sufficiently than there were in the past. So I'm jealous of folks that maybe don't have to physically slog through it, but being comfortable in Slack. Track is what is the ticket backlog for WordPress core. It is not a modern tool. It dates back probably decades at this point, perhaps. So the UI itself is a little arcane. But getting in there, being comfortable with being able to use some of the pre-built reports that are issues that are in the current milestones, so the release we're working on, whether that is 6.9 or perhaps next 6.9.1 if there's a minor release. Being comfortable in Track. If you're contributing to Gutenberg, that'll be in GitHub. So having some familiarity with issues and pull requests. Those are probably the most common tools. And then if you are publishing a summary or an agenda for a team meeting, that's on the Make blogs. Those are all individual WordPress sites. Hopefully many people here are comfortable with that. If not, glad that you're here. Let's get you comfortable with WordPress, and then we'll get you into communicating on Make blogs. You got one in the front.
So I assume you're doing this on the side in addition to what you do in the company.
In the past, it has been additional. Part of my current job is actually to contribute to community-owned open source, so I am a fortunately sponsored contributor. But before the role I'm in, it had been additional in personal time, nights, weekends, or perhaps during the day, and then having to shift day work to some other time. So, yeah.
Part of my next follow-up was going to be how do you dedicate your time to doing this plus that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's where fortunately something like writing an agenda or even the summary are things that can be done asynchronously. Don't take more realistically than an hour or two, depending on just how comfortable you are synthesizing a Slack chat for a meeting summary. So, I would say the lowest common denominator in terms of effort would be about an hour or two. Although it'll probably take a couple weeks of just maybe shadowing somebody or asking some questions. And those conversations probably happen during, business working hours, perhaps. But the drafting a make post could be certainly on the night or the weekends. Generally, folks prefer to have the agenda published before the meeting, so usually early in the week. The summary, if it's the same day, great. If it's later in the week, it's not a problem. But yeah, oftentimes it may mean doing some of that contribution during your working hours, and again, needing to shift that work to some other time during the week.
And are the dev teams that are part of these contributor make groups, are they pretty receptive to someone like us as a PM that's saying, hey, I want to help, where can I help?
Yes, I would say back when I started, it was a little hard at first to find out from Helen and Aaron how I could help them as a PM, and they were engineers, they were committers to core, and I think they were kind of just so busy it was hard for them to even say the words of I need help with this thing. And so when it started, I was just observing and seeing the things that they were doing, and I was like, oh, I can run a meeting, I can take notes. That's fairly simple, and that doesn't take an engineer to do. And I think once I started taking that off their plate, they were like, oh, duh, of course I don't need to do that, and thank you for doing that, because I hate that work, right? And I'm like, I understand it. It's not the most glamorous, but I can do that, and now I'm helping, and that feels good to contribute. Trying to remember what I was thinking there. Oh, and so I think if you reached out to the core team reps, if you reached out to in a release lead channel to say, hey, I'm a PM, I'm a product manager, I'm a designer, whatever, and I'm looking to help with writing agendas or summaries, they would be elated. Because usually they don't have any help and it falls to them to do all those things. So having somebody raise their hand, it might take a day to get a response. It might take a week or two to schedule a call for them to walk you through the sorts of things that you would need to do. But absolutely, I would be shocked and pretty sad if they weren't very receptive to somebody raising their hand for help. And it doesn't have to be the core team. If you're passionate about design, or if you're passionate about AI, or passionate about some of the, thank you, training team, docs. There are, if you go to make.wordpress.org, there's a list of all the contributing teams there. And so depending on what your professional interests are or what your personal interests are, it might align to one of those teams. Thank you, Courtney. And not just the core team. I say that by default because that's primarily where I started, but there are many teams on the WordPress project that could use PM help, not just core.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.